The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you might be. This is the monthly Blanchard Systems DALiM tips and tricks. My name is Mike Moscato, and I'm going to run through the presentation for you today. The topic today is ETWiST. Now, ETWiST has been around for a couple of years, so it may be kind of odd that we're all of a sudden doing a webinar on it, but we had a request for this. I'm quite certain it was at the end of the last webinar. It might have been a question or customer request. Do ETWiST. Now, that's a kind of a vague generic request. I mean, there's a lot of different things you could show or do in ETWiST, but what I go over today, or the way I go over it, is really going to be from the point of view of kind of comparing it to normal twist, because we kind of sort of know that at their core, they're kind of the same thing, but they're different, right? And there's a lot of things we're used to doing in twist, and we know how to do them. And then you look at ETWiST and you kind of scratch your head and you say, why can't I see the workflows? Why can't I see the work items? And the whole notion of how things are configured, with twist, you have a cluster, you got 2 twist servers or 3, but there's a master, and you got the slave servers, and you got the repository and the gate. ETWiST, that stuff really doesn't exist, except for the repository, but even he's a different animal. The way you manage workflows is totally different. Logging and job history in ETWiST, probably the most god-awful aspect of the whole thing. So you can see I'm taking a real positive view of this. I think the point is, I really think that's one of the more frustrating parts of dealing with ETWiST, but I'll try to show you how to handle it without going insane. This is a very important one too, I think, because you have to remember that when you're dealing with twist, you have kind of a standalone workflow engine. Throw a bunch of stuff in, make some files, and it may have absolutely nothing to do with ES. You just crank files through and do your normal automated stuff. In most respects, ETWiST is tied to ES. So the notion of going to ETWiST is usually associated with files coming into a very specific project. But what if I want to use ETWiST kind of like twist? I don't want to put them in an ES project. I just want to crunch some files. I got this fabulous workflow engine. Why can't I do that? The whole approach to queuing, prioritizing. I'm already blah-blahing too much because I suspect I'm not going to get through all this stuff. So I'll just throw a couple other things up in this goofy list, because the sooner I get the sooner I get started, or better, the sooner we can get through this. So let's hop out of whatever this is, Keynote, yes. And let's get into the webinars on ETWiST, but of course I'll start in ES just to confuse matters. I'm going to start, and I'm going to do something very simple. Of course, I need the editor open first. The editor I'm using is the native editor. And if you've ever seen this, I don't think too many customers in production have normal twist and ETWiST running on the same server, but I happen to. And the editor can detect that you have both, and it'll ask which one I want to run. We're doing ETWiST, so we'll go here. So there's our queues. So here's how I'm going to start. We got a project in ES. We just want to submit a bunch of files. And you can probably guess these files are going to a ES workflow that has an ETWiST workflow in it. So, you know, what we're looking at here, there is nothing all that fancy about it. One thing I want you to notice, though, is I do have two ETWiST servers in the mix. This guy is actually ETWiST running on basically like an all-in-one ES server, and this is a dedicated ES server, this one called ES5. Although he doesn't look like he's getting anything right now. So, yeah, of course, we're starting off on the right foot here. And actually, the point I want to make here in terms of files, oh, there they go. Files going to both ETWiST servers is that normally if we're looking in the twist editor, we can see a list of workflows. And we can say, I want this workflow to be published to both twist servers. I want this one to only be published to one. But within ETWiST, all that stuff is kind of opaque. So although we see that this workflow is running on both servers, the question basically comes to mind, well, how do I determine that? How do I know that it's going to be on both, and how can I maybe publish it to just one of them if I want to? So let's start getting into the weeds here of some of the basic configuration stuff. There's all my files coming in, we know that. Our journey basically starts in the ES system configuration and under your device queue. So let's look at my dedicated ETWiST server. Now we know that ETWiST workflows appear as individual plugins in a device controller. So every one of these is a workflow. And the one we were just running, let's see if I can find it. This is that workflow that all that stuff just ran through. So he's obviously running on my standalone ETWiST server. And he's also running over here on this one. So let's say we say to ourselves, I don't want him running on both. I only want him running on one of them. So there's no way to do that from it within the editor, which a normal twist user would be accustomed to doing. So we have to control the workflow queues and who does what from our device queue setups. So this guy, I'm going to tell him, I don't want you sending anything to that workflow. So now everything that goes through this guy will go only to that ETWiST server. And the thing that I think is a little different about this, and maybe, again, makes it a little less obvious, is this is not an area that a normal user is going to be messing around in. This is pretty much restricted to admin users. You know, you're not going to have normal users messing around in here. So, you know, controlling and managing your ETWiST workflows is almost exclusively an admin function now. You know, no normal person who's looking in the twist editor is going to be messing with this stuff. Now, there's also the fact that all workflows are dependent on the main controller capacity, meaning how many separate processes can this thing run at one time. And then you also have these capacities per workflow. And, you know, this is something that in a lot of ways, it might be a case of DALiM over-engineering things, because you really have very fine control over, how many could be sent, which ETWiST servers to send it to. But you will invariably get into a situation where maybe this is a workflow that's used more than the others. So I want to make his capacity 4. And maybe this other one, maybe only 3. But there is no magic formula, in terms of factoring your controller capacity, number of workflows, which workflow is the most important to you, to come up with some sort of spreadsheet to tell you how all these can be configured. It is truly a matter of working with these things for a while and maybe kind of fine-tuning your settings, or getting a feel for who might be hogging up all the resources and who might need to get kicked up a notch so he can do a little more. But you're not going to just stare at this, run some sort of calculation and know how these all should be set up. And the other thing I should mention is, when you make a change in here, you really need to do this update controller setting in here, because from within the ES interface, we make these changes. But this ETWiST server, for example, he runs on a completely separate server, and he's got his own queue management set up. So we have to make sure that thing gets updated. And whenever you do that sort of thing, you'll see these things suddenly go inactive. So you might play a little dance sometimes in terms of getting those to behave. In fact, you'll notice this guy, this is the one I set to 0 earlier. It's set to 2 again. Why? Because I didn't update the controller on it. So in terms of that other ETWiST server that I mentioned, here's, we're going to look at one of the more basic settings in here that is kind of the key to getting this to all behave to begin with. So I'm going to the DALiM ES admin URL on that dedicated ETWiST server, this guy. We go to the ETWiST tab, and let's zoom up. This setting down here is where we get ETWiST to behave in a twistish manner. By that I mean, if you have multiple ETWiST servers, there still has to be a central area or a central repository where they get their workflows and ICC profiles and pre-flight profiles and all that kind of stuff. And in an ES/ETWiST environment, that machine is your engine or app server. So this ETWiST server that I'm on, which is CentOS ES5, he looks to a completely different server as his main repository. If you forget to set this URL up properly in a dedicated ETWiST server, you will get no love. Basically, this will still be basically a kind of free roaming TWiST server that doesn't know how to take instructions from the engine. And again, the engine doles this stuff out to the different ETWiST servers in your cluster.
Mike, we do have a question. I think you kind of covered this, but someone's asking, how do you find out your controller capacity?
For a dedicated ETWiST server, well, how do you find it out? Here's how I find it out. I put in a number I want. Now, that may sound like a smart aleck answer, but it really isn't. I mean, whenever you go to your settings JSP file on a server, you have that setting in there that says, what is your capacity, small, medium, large, right? And ES will set a default value for you. Frankly, even that is a bogus value. You really should set your controller capacity based on the capabilities of your server. For instance, let's say you cheaped out and you got a 2 CPU server with the, 2 gigs of RAM on it. Now, we would never recommend that, but people don't always do what we want. If you did that, you probably might want to lower that capacity, because if you start blasting that thing, he's probably going to get overwhelmed a bit. I tend to think, and this is just me, I think you should generally aim high. Put something like that in there. And then if it proves that, that guy is real sluggish, he's going a little slow, maybe you can back off on it. But there really is no magic number. I wish I had one, but I don't.
But the full controller capacity, if you're running it as a ETWiST server and it's a render engine doing some stuff, you want to make sure that the controller capacity is at least more than your hard workers and your renderers.
Yes, but I'll just offer my own opinion. I think combining an ETWiST server with a renderer is a horrible idea.
Yeah, it used to be an old recommendation from Christoph Bindler that we've kind of shown in production that doesn't work well.
Well, I'll just give an example of that we saw recently. And that was, let's make believe that this guy here is an ETWiST server and he's a renderer, just for the heck of it. Now, you might be blasting a lot of files through Twist or ETWiST, a lot of workflows. Maybe some of these were, maybe this one is kicked up, you run all sorts of stuff. Maybe he's 8 and, maybe this guy is 4, who knows? But it's very possible if you're really cranking through ETWiST, he could suck up the entire used capacity. So when the renderer needs to get in there and do some renderer stuff, he's going to have to wait. And I don't think you want that. I think you want your renderer to always be ready to fire. You don't want him stuck behind ETWiST, or maybe even vice versa, although that's less likely. So if you are in that circumstance, you probably should be pretty careful about your queue capacity on your capacity per workflow, so it doesn't suck up all the oxygen for what your renderer may need. And again, I wish I had a magic spreadsheet that showed how to factor all this, but there's not one that I know of. I want to get back here. This is one of the more magical, bizarre settings that DALiM has introduced here that I've never understood, but here it is. I happen to know that on my ETWiST server, this guy, I'm licensed for 5 hard workers. So look at this setting. What does this mean? This means if I start blasting a bunch of files to this ETWiST server, it's going to tell ETWiST, the heck with those 5 hard workers you're licensed for. I only want you to run 2 at a time. Now, that doesn't necessarily change what's getting queued up behind, because what gets sent to the Twist server is determined by those queue settings, that we saw in the controller. But they're going to back up because I just told my 5 hard worker licensed Twist server, the heck with it, just use 2 of them. So I tend to think that's a pretty dumb setting. But if you ever happen to look at ETWiST and go, boy, it just seems like it's not really doing a whole lot of files at the same time, make sure that value is set equal to or higher than the number of hard workers you're licensed for, and you will be a happier person.
Especially if you've added hard workers to a machine, it's good. You got to go back there and look and make sure it gets adjusted right.
Yep. And as with anything in the, these DALiM WS admin areas, you always have to hit stop, make your change, hit start again, and then you're in the game. Okay. want to talk now about how you get stuff through ETWiST. And more specifically, I'm going to look at cheating ETWiST so that you can use it like a normal twist server. Because again, we know what some of the differences are, but how do we get the stuff we like to use before and use it here? So I think most of us understand normal ETWiST Mojo. An ETWiST workflow is a step within an ES workflow. So this is that stuff I threw at the beginning, right? Came in, it went to that ETWiST workflow, did its thing, returned it here. Everybody's happy. That's normal. But let's say we want to do something like this. I'm really not interested in filling up a project in ES. I got myself an ETWiST server. It does twist stuff. I need to do a bunch of file conversions. I'm going to dump a bunch of images in. I'm going to do a ICC conversion. I think I'm just embedding a profile or something here. Yeah. And I want to spit out some PSD files. I want to dump them in a folder. That's all I want to do. That's a simple twist workflow. How do I do that in ETWiST without having to, upload through a folder? I just want to use hot folders and have a nice day. Okay, let's do that. Let's have a nice day. So what do we know about ES? Well, ES has hot folders, right? It's got input channels. They can be FTP watchers. They can just be normal hot folder watcher guys. So we know how to get stuff into ES through hot folders. So why don't we just use ES as a surrogate for twist hot folders, bypass the whole put it in a project stuff, and get twist to do some work for us. Here's an FTP watcher looking at the desktop on my Mac. I'm not going to bore you with ES rules. I'll only mention, if you've never done this, when you set up your rules, you always have the option to use this little beauty. Pick up a file, don't assign it to a project. File's not assigned. Notice how it grays out the production structure. So I'm saying slip in through the side door, but don't go in any of that project stuff. All I want you to do is start this workflow. Now again, since this is ES, it's not starting an ETWiST workflow, but it is starting an ES workflow in which the only thing that's sitting in there is ETWiST. So we're basically going to do an end around the whole ES stuff and just feed things through a hot folder. Let's do it. Here's a bunch of junk. Now, I do have these things named so that they're going to match some naming convention mojo that's in that ETWiST workflow. And I'll mention that this is a routine that one of our customers uses. So there they go. Here they are. And again, I'm running twist, although I'm cheating and doing it through ETWiST. So what's going to happen? So that we can easily see those, I actually have it dumping those to the file system. So it went to my file system in ES, right? It created folders based on all the names, parked them all in there, and I'm happy as a clam. I used hot folders to feed ETWiST. So now I'll show you the gotchas involved in this. As you saw, when I looked at the rule I was using, it uses files not assigned. What do we know about ES in terms of files not assigned? All those files get parked here and they build up and you get a whole bunch of them, right? Now, there are mechanisms within ES to clean that junk out. I've got it set after a day, delete all that stuff for me. Fair enough. But there's another issue that comes into play here that you may or may not be too happy with. We're going to get a little deeper into this later. Well, maybe not, because we're running long. But in the event logs, you do have the ability to do filters and look for your specific ETWiST workflows. There's the one I just ran, right? So we look at that, we go, what the heck? I have no record or history of anything having run through here. And the reason is, technically, I never really registered those things with ES, right? Because this is dependent on it actually being assigned to a project. So if I go hunting and looking later, saying, I'm wondering about a couple of these files, I have no record of it. So it would be nice if there was a better way to do this that would, number one, leave a record of what had happened, and number two, not stuff everything into files not assigned, even knowing that stuff's going to be deleted. Maybe I don't want it hanging around. I want to have more control. Maybe I want to delete it all after, a couple minutes after I verified the stuff was in. So let's look at approach number two to this. Let's go into my rules again. I've got a completely different rule. Well, not completely, it's very similar. The only difference is I'm not going to files not assigned. What I'm doing is I'm setting up essentially a dumping ground project in ES. It's my grab, stash, and delete project. That's where it lives. And all that I want it to do is when I pick, and again, this is hot folder driven, just like ETWiST, I'm going to dump stuff in a folder. ES is going to pick it up. It's going to run it through the workflow that's associated with that, which is slightly different than that simplistic one we just ran. And it's still going to do the same ETWiST workflow and deposit the stuff, but watch what's going to happen at the end of it. So let's get into webinar, grab, stash, and delete. So you'll notice there's nothing in there. That's the name of the workflow we're going to go through. So let's look at what ES is doing to assist us in this sneaking it in through the backdoor approach. We're going to pick the file out. We're going to run it through that same workflow. It's still going to stash it on the file system for me, but then it's going to stop. And I've got one of these milestones set up that is going to time out after 5 minutes. What's it going to do after 5 minutes? Well, it's going to release it, and it's going to go to document step, and it's going to delete the file. So I don't have to depend upon the files not assigned routine running and deleting it every day. I'm going to park these things for 5 minutes, and if nobody cares a whit about it, it'll wipe them. So let's see about that. Let's go to the Finder. That's a different folder. Yeah, let's see, I don't have too many of these. Let's throw these guys in. We'll assume that they're going to get picked up, but let's wait. There they go. So what do we know is happening? Whammo, they're going to come in here, right? But again, they're only coming in to get parked for a bit. The main goal here is to run them through an ETWiST workflow that we've fed via hot folder, and we really are not interested in assigning them to a project at all. In fact, I'm not even wasting the horsepower to create a preview. Why should I? I'm just going to throw them in here, I'm basically putting them in there for the sake of deleting them and also for the sake of capturing a record of it. Here's the files that came in. It was these Smith files, I think. So the difference between what I did originally and this one is, let's go to the event log. And I say, you know what, I'm still curious about that ETWiST workflow, the one doing this file system stuff. And now we actually have a record of it. So we feel a little better about ourselves, right? We know what happened and we can track it. Now let's look at one of the biggest bugaboos with ETWiST and the editor. Here's these files that just completed. If you had a normal twist and you're in the editor, go, I wonder. Now you can't see me, but I'm clicking like the dickens on this thing right now. I want to look at the log. Please, I beg, show me the log. And it will not give it up. Now you might say, it's, it used to be maybe just the editor is kind of frozen or gorked. Maybe I can close it and reopen it and it'll work. But that is not the case. In fact, I inquired with DALiM about this week, and they basically confirmed, if the file is still running in here, you can get these logs to open, like that guy. See, this guy is kind of sitting in a validate kind of thing, work item. I can get him. But when they complete, you can just beat on it till the cows come home. It's not going to give it up. Where are you going to get it? Really, the only useful and readable place to get it is under your event log. And, you really should get used to learning how to filter based on, say, a specific ETWiST workflow name. And, you can get down even further, you want the specific file name. There's that one that has. So you can filter this stuff very narrowly. And then, the main thing to point out is you get in here and you go, oh, there we go. There's my workflow log. And then you are presented with the bizarre color choices DALiM has made for the text, because it's not enough that they made it difficult to find it, but it ain't all that easy to read either. But you can see here that I have access to all the log files, but I think we can all agree it's not as convenient as what traditional twist users are used to in the editor. So if you want it, it's there. And save your abuse for someone else. Okay. Now I'm going to show you the ultimate cheat. The big cheat is this. Twist has hot folders. You throw stuff in hot folders and they get picked up and off they go. Why the heck can't I just do that with ETWiST? Why do I have to do those goofy workarounds that you just saw me do, where I kind of route it through ES to get the things to go in? Well, let's see if that's actually possible. And let's see, I think I forgot to mount this share. Let's mount it. Should have had this up beforehand. And let's see, I think this is how I log in. Hopefully, my permissions on this. Now, watch what I'm doing. I'm going into the workflows folder. And as I mentioned earlier, this happens to be a server that's running ETWiST and Twist. So you notice I have a separate ETWiST folder in there. There's all my hot folders. That's the workflow we've been goofing with. So you say, why can't I just throw my files in there and process them? I'm an upstanding citizen. I ought to be able to do that. Well, see what happens. Look at that. They're all picked up. They're going through. No errors. And watch this. Even when these things complete, you can still open the log. So this is the point of the program where you say, why did you waste my time showing me that other stuff? This is a perfectly great way to do things. Well, the reason I save this for last is DALiM will tell you that this is a completely unsupported method of submitting files to ETWiST. Did I do it? Yes. Did it work? It sure did. So this is a feature that I would say is, it's not intentional, but it is usable. And having said that, if you ever use it and it doesn't work, our response will be, well, it's not supported. Have a nice day. And then you say, but that Mike Moscato guy did a webinar and he showed me how to do it. And then we'll say, yes, but he also told you it's not supported. So
We do have a question on that, Mike. Does that support load balancing?
no, it doesn't. Because it doesn't know what load balancing is. Because the input files tool in here, although you see that servers dispatching, ETWiST doesn't really know what that is. Because that kind of servers dispatching in a normal twist environment involves the master and slave knowing about each other. ES doesn't know anything about what just happened here. And the whole notion of, distributed ETWiST servers in here is controlled through the engine. If you look at my logs in ES right now, that they haven't got a clue. Because remember when we did the filter earlier for everything that went through that ETWiST workflow? That's just the stuff that I sent through that cheater workflow earlier. The stuff that I just dumped in, it ain't there anymore. And just to kind of finish the thought on that grab, stash, and delete thing that I ran earlier, you will see all those files that had been parked for temporarily earlier, they're all gone. They all got wiped out as we wanted them to. And just as a side lesson in event log filtering, if we were to filter on stuff that got deleted today, this is basically the record of those files that got deleted out of that project that we dumped them in earlier. So, these things that kind of happen semi-invisibly in the background, we can always, well, not always, but we can usually backtrack and find out what happened, when, why. Well, maybe not why, but we'll know how it happened. Okay, so you have just learned how to cheat and throw things into ETWiST workflows, and you've also learned that for now you're on your own. I will mention that when I brought this up with DALiM the other day, the answer was, no, it's not supported. But the addendum to that is there is a project at DALiM to try to spludge or merge twist and ETWiST into basically a combined or merged product. And the implication of the answer was that they gave was that when that happens, the whole idea of dumping in twist workflow hot folders will certainly be supported. It has to be for it to be a real twist server. So that is a proceed at your own peril kind of thing. All right. What did I, okay, here, this is the next thing I want to show. And I can, oh boy, I'm already close to running too long. I'm going to show this one. One thing that traditional twist users, a lot of people still use it. They love it. They like their web link. Got to have web link. Now, let's face it. If you're here in ES and you're submitting files, you kind of have web link. In that, you're hitting the uploader guy, right? And you dump a bunch of files in and you upload. Although, obviously, well, not obviously, but you're usually doing that to bring files into a particular project in ES. But the other thing that people like WebLink for is the ability to upload and have the little job ticket thing in there. Well, if you've got the job ticket option in ES, you certainly have that capability with ETWiST. I made a job ticket here. And if you think about the way WebLink works, with WebLink, it just puts them all down there. But we have the ability in ES with job ticketing to control what we see. For instance, if I wanted to upload these files and just run the ETWiST workflow as is, I just won't hit that button. So it'll just default. But we can then present all these options, right, that we want to run, that are going to push some variables to ETWiST. And, even with that, we can disappear settings. Because if we're running a PDF X1A, we certainly don't need to worry about flattening settings because it has to flatten it. And we got all this other good stuff, right? So we can certainly do web linky behavior to control ETWiST and submit files with as many or as few controls as we want. And I'm not sure how I have that one set up. Now notice, this is what I was mentioning earlier. If you got a file that's still running, you can get that log to come up. Now, I think I told this thing to create some PNG files. That's why I kind of forked in the workflow. So I should see some files showing up on my file system down here in my miscellaneous folder, right? So again, that is web linkiness or web linky type behavior with ETWiST, but again, driven from ES. Oh, there we go. That thing only comes about 10 times a day.
Alternative to even that, if you don't want your customers having to log into an ES and navigate to a project, you can do something similar with Mike showing, just using the API to upload files to a dummy project. For instance, is a grab and delete type project that gets rid of them or stashes them based on metadata or job ticket information.
Yeah, I've already pretty much run too long because we're probably going to have to do another webinar if folks want to see it, because there are things unique to ETWiST that I didn't even get into. For instance, I'll just show you this one real quick. I mean, this guy right here is a very important and useful thing that you can use in ETWiST that deals most times with sending a grouped file out of the user action. It's a great way to control, bust those files apart and be able to sift through metadata. And the whole approach to passing variables to ETWiST and passing them from ETWiST back into ES is an important concept to understand. But
we definitely doing a part 2 of this and further that more complex.
Yeah, unless if the attendees say they've already been ETWiSTed out of their minds, that's fine too. But it might be a useful thing to go over. Were there any other questions that you had laying around?
Just a couple of quick ones. difference in that editor you showed versus what people are used to using with Twist?
Oh, well, in fact, this was another thing I was going to cover. I'll do this real quick. You got a couple workflows here. I want to do the workflow archive thing and send them out to somebody, right? Well, I don't have a workflow list. How the heck do I do it? This thing actually exists in the normal Twist editor, but I don't think I've ever used it. You got this archiver thing. What's it do? It shows you all your workflows, right? So I need that one. Add to archive. I want him. Add to archive, and maybe this one we've been goofing around with today. Show archive. There they all are. Make archive. My whiffles. So I just archive workflows out of the ETWiST editor. The other thing that, frankly, I think is a bit half-baked is I want to unpublish a workflow. A couple ways to do it. Open a workflow, right-click, properties. If I turn him off, that guy will disappear from my ETWiST queues in the controller. Not going to do it, but that's what it'll do. And this is actually a handy one. I think I have an example of that. If you've used, say, ES Connect or ETWiST before, you are used to, let me see if this is the one. I did one of these earlier. Yeah. You're used to, when you look at all your variables that show up, you'll see a hodgepodge where they will be defined as variables in the name of it, or you'll see a bunch that are underscore web link underscore. And they're all kind of mixed in together, and it can sometimes make you well, wait a minute, is it getMem variables? Is it getMem underscore web link? Which is it? So it's not that those things don't work, but it can sometimes be confusing. So if you use this little goober here, they will always just come over as variables, and you won't see all the intermingled underscore web link underscore stuff. Couple others, but I won't bore you with them right now. They're more obscure.
Yeah, and the simple answer, Doug, to that question, I think, is the editor that Mike's using is actually an installed app on his client machine instead of a JNLP. So you don't run into problems with Java.
Question? Oh.
I think that was the gist of that question.
Well, this is the installed app here, and
so you don't run into security setting issues running it.
Oh, okay. This is the web start editor guy. No, I did that wrong. So this behaves pretty much like the Twist web, the editor TWE thing you get when you download from a normal Twist server. So there he is, and once I get here, it doesn't look much different than the guy we were using earlier.
But every time they update Java, you don't have to worry about having to update the security preferences on it. And
oh yeah, for sure.
One day, Apple deciding to stop Java, so you can't run it at all, or any of that.
If you are a ES newbie or soon to be an ES person, you go here, you will see right there, you can download the native Twist editor client for Mac, or there's some people who run Windows. They're a very odd sort, but they are still out there.
And I think that's it for the questions, since we're already coming up to 2 o'clock almost.
Yeah, I didn't think I'd get close to getting done, but that's just because I talk too much.
So if y'all are interested in us going further with this, am I continuing this maybe in the January or February webinars? Because we're going to try to reserve, hopefully, if ever get a license for ES55, that'll be covered with whatever we discuss in the Worldwide Technology Meeting, which will be coming up at the beginning of December. So hopefully that should be our December webinar, and then we can continue this if everybody has an interest. Just send us an email. And I already got.
I will say,
already send yes, part 2, please.
I look forward to the first support call for someone who throws files directly into the ETWiST workflow hot folders, because I've already written my response. So,
all right. And we now have 3 yes, please, part 2. So you definitely hit on a good topic, and we definitely will continue this.
Well, the last thing I'll say in closing, I might have already said it, but just to reiterate, I do think even people who've worked with ETWiST for a while, it's much more opaque than normal twist is, because I think you've seen, just for where I had to go for the logs and managing workflows per server, they are in kind of non-obvious places. So it looks on the surface like, some sort of voodoo's going on that you don't have any control over. You do, but those things are in more disparate regions as opposed to this.
But I would say, there's good and bad to that, because once you learn where you find the information, at least it is stored in a database and it's kept there, as opposed to a standalone twist where once the file is going from your processes, you have to dig through log files on the file system to try to find maybe a history of that file and what happened to it.
Yeah, that is true.
Okay, well, I think we'll close on that. So again, thanks everybody for attending. Again, the third Wednesday, if that works out correctly, of December, we'll be doing the Worldwide Technology Meeting recap, and hopefully actually have a license 5.5 that I can show you. So we look forward to talking to y'all then. And for that, everybody have a great Thanksgiving.